The sands of Egypt hold more than monuments of stone and glittering tombs of kings. Beneath the golden mask of history lies a shadow, one that whispers of forbidden passions, hidden rituals, and carnal practices so unsettling that even scribes dared not write them in full. Imagine standing before the pyramids, marveling at the genius of human creation, but knowing that behind closed temple doors, behind palace curtains, acts were taking place that mixed desire with cruelty, love with punishment, and pleasure with death. These are not the stories of gods and heroes we hear in textbooks. These are the stories of dark desires, buried deliberately under centuries of sand, from the mighty pharaohs who ruled like living gods to the common people who bowed before them. Sexuality in ancient Egypt was not simply private. It was woven into religion, politics, and power. Rituals of fertility mixed with brutality. Families were bound by unions we would call unthinkable today. And in the shadows of temples, priests and priestesses carried out ceremonies that blurred the line between worship and exploitation. What happens when passion becomes control, when intimacy becomes ritual, and when the body becomes an offering to the gods? Tonight, we peel away the veil of time to expose the forbidden world of Egypt's most horrifying sexual practices. And what you are about to hear is not the Egypt you know. To understand these desires, we must first step into the mindset of the ancient Egyptians. For them, life and death were inseparable. The Nile's floods mirrored the rhythms of fertility and decay. Their gods were not distant. They lived in every grain of sand, every harvest, every womb. And so, sexuality was not hidden or whispered about. It was divine. It was a tool of creation, power, and control. Pharaohs were considered incarnations of gods. Their unions were believed to maintain cosmic balance. This meant practices that today we would consider taboo, like sibling marriages, were common among royal families. It was not about love. It was about bloodlines, power, and the illusion of divine perfection. Religion itself was soaked in erotic imagery. Myths told of gods and goddesses engaging in shocking acts, setting examples for human rituals. For instance, the myth of Osiris and Isis, where Isis reassembled her husband's body and conceived a child, was reenacted in ceremonies that combined mourning with sexuality. Priests used these performances to remind people that life could spring from death, but the methods used could be brutal and humiliating. Even in everyday life, sexuality was intertwined with control. Women held surprising freedoms. They could own property, initiate divorce, even act as priestesses. But these freedoms came at a cost. Their bodies were often viewed as vessels for divine will, to be offered, judged, and controlled. Brothels flourished, and in some cases they operated not only as houses of pleasure, but as extensions of temple rituals, where intimacy became sacrifice. And it was not only pleasure, it was punishment. Sexuality became a weapon in the arsenal of power. For enemies of the state, for women accused of betrayal, even for slaves, acts of intimacy could be twisted into methods of torture. This was Egypt beyond the gold and glory, a place where desire and fear danced together in the dark. Imagine the hidden chambers of a pharaoh's palace, where beauty was forced into obedience. Royal concubines were not chosen for love. They were chosen for political alliances, for gifts from foreign lands, or simply for the pharaoh's desire. For many of these women, life in the palace was gilded slavery. Failure to please could mean disgrace, exile, or worse, execution. One of the darkest practices tied to power was ritualized incest. Pharaohs often married their sisters or daughters to maintain pure bloodlines. These women had no choice, bound to lives of submission in the name of divine order. To the world outside, these unions represented stability, but inside the palace walls they were prisons of flesh. Temples, too, held shadows. The cult of fertility gods demanded rituals that shocked even visiting foreigners. Some accounts describe ceremonies where priestesses or temple prostitutes performed acts before idols, acts meant to ensure the Nile's flooding or the fertility of crops. But these performances were not always willing. They could be forced upon slaves, captives, or women taken against their will. In this way, faith became an excuse for exploitation. But perhaps the most horrifying were punishments that used sexuality as a tool of control. Prisoners accused of betrayal were stripped, humiliated, and violated in ways meant not only to break their bodies, but to destroy their spirits. Female slaves were often traded not only for labor, but for the hidden desires of their masters. Children, too, were not always spared in a world where power meant ownership of everything, even innocence. These practices were rarely written in stone, but fragments survive. Whispers in ancient papyri, writings of shocked Greek visitors, and silent evidence in murals that depict acts too explicit for polite interpretation. Historians piece together a disturbing picture, one where Egypt's greatness was not just measured by pyramids, but by the suffering hidden in its shadows. Imagine being one of those concubines trapped behind golden doors. Your beauty is your curse, your body owned not by you but by a man considered a god. You cannot say no. You cannot escape. Every smile you give is survival. Every gesture calculated to keep your head attached to your body. The world may envy your silks and jewels, but beneath them lies chains that no one sees. Imagine being a slave dragged into a temple ritual. You are told this act is for the gods, that your body is not yours, but a sacrifice. You look up at the painted eyes of Isis or Hathor, begging for protection, but the only answer is silence. Faith, which should comfort, has become your prison. And imagine the horror of punishments designed to shame and destroy. Victims were left broken, not just in body but in soul. Their cries were drowned by the chants of priests or the laughter of soldiers. These acts left scars that history does not record, but they were real, lived by thousands whose names are lost to time. It is easy to romanticize Egypt with its pyramids, its treasures, its gods. But behind every monument was a world where power used desire as a weapon. Behind the gold was blood. Behind the myths was misery. The story of Egypt's dark desires is not told to shame the dead, but to remind the living. History is not just glory, it is also cruelty. The same civilization that gave us wonders of architecture also carried secrets of pain and humiliation. And those who suffered under the shadow of power left no monuments, only whispers. What can we learn? That unchecked power corrupts even the most sacred parts of life. That when intimacy is turned into a tool of control, humanity itself is lost. These stories may belong to the past, but the warning belongs to us. So the next time you see the pyramids rise against the sky, remember, they are not only tombs for kings. They are also silent witnesses to desires that were never meant to be spoken. If you found this journey into history's shadows haunting and thought-provoking, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this story so others may know the truth behind the golden mask of Egypt. Because history, no matter how dark, must never be forgotten.